The movie begins in 1965, where Bernard Garrett is in Washington, D.C., about to testify before a committee. But before anything else, someone whispers that he should be careful because they're ready to make an example of him. And like a classic movie twist, we're transported back to 1939, where Bernard, a young boy in Willis, Texas, shines shoes while listening to conversations about finance and real estate. The guy takes note of every word like he's planning to become the next real estate mogul. But what does he get in return? A cop chasing him off, accusing him of spying on white people. When he gets home, his dad drops a bomb of wisdom. Back in his day, black folks could be lynched for far less. And, of course, as a good father, he warns Bernard that no white man will ever let him make money. But Bernard? He swears he's going to get rich no matter what. Fast forward to 1954 in Los Angeles, where Bernard arrives with his wife and son. His wife's uncle suggests he work at an airplane factory, but Bernard politely declines with a smile. His business is real estate. Naturally, the uncle laughs at him. But who hasn't heard that joke before? Bernard promises a house for his wife, but for now, they settle into a small house in the uncle's backyard. When Bernard starts scouting properties, an affordable one pops up, but it's in a white neighborhood, which complicates things. His sharp-witted wife suggests he talk to Joe, her former boss. Bernard finds Joe too laid-back, a real playboy, and doesn't want to do business with him. But after seeing the governor shake Joe's hand, Bernard starts to reconsider. Patrick, the owner of the property Bernard wants, isn't easily fooled. Bernard impresses him by correcting his business calculations, but Patrick still won't give him the loan. And here's the moment I would have handled differently, trying to negotiate directly with Patrick's banker. Seriously, Bernard, that was way too bold. But that bold move actually made Patrick change his mind, and he closed the deal. Now picture this, Bernard and his wife at a club, ready to celebrate, and Joe pops up again, because he's just not disappearing from Bernard's life that easily. After a while, Bernard partners up with Patrick to expand their business. They buy more properties, and everything seems to be going great until Patrick is suddenly found dead. Now, with Patrick's widow offering a tiny piece of their shared assets, Bernard realizes his name isn't on any of the documents. The irony here is that, despite being the brains behind the success, he has no way to prove his involvement. What's interesting here is how Bernard, with no other option, has to accept 25% of the business or walk away with nothing. This highlights the importance of being legally protected, which Bernard clearly wasn't. After some long reflection, Bernard comes up with a brilliant idea: buy the Bankers Building, the famous Bankers Building, so that, as the owner, banks would think twice before denying him loans. For this plan, he needs Matt, a white friend, to be the face of the operation. And so, Matt's training begins, from learning real estate calculations to golf etiquette. This movie is based on true events, and Garrett was one of the first black men to acquire large properties in white areas during the era of segregation in the U.S. So, what would I have done differently? Well, I definitely would have listened to Bernard's wife earlier about Joe. She clearly had better intuition about the guy, but Bernard took his sweet time realizing it. Proud, Bernard's dad almost bursts with joy, that typical fatherly pride that makes anyone feel like a superhero, even if they shined a lot of rich folks' shoes on a bank sidewalk years ago. The next day, Bernard walks with his son, Bernard Jr., and sees the old bank where he used to shine shoes with the same dedication a jeweler has when cutting diamonds. Back in Los Angeles, Bernard reveals to Joe that he wants to buy that bank in Texas. Joe, being the practical and realistic friend, responds with a classic line: running a bank is way more complicated than it looks, especially in a place where people aren't too keen on seeing a black man succeed. But Bernard is stubborn, so he convinces Joe that they can pull it off, just like they did with the Bankers Building. Sometime later, with the help of Donald, Joe's banker, they buy the bank. Everything runs like a well-rehearsed dance until Florence, the son of the former owner, finds out the bank is lending money to black people. He turns into a storm of problems, worried about a possible bank run. And, of course, a treasury inspection is on the horizon. The solution? Matt, Bernard and Joe's trusted man, suggests buying another bank to spread out the loans and dilute the risks. The comedic detail? Matt has only 3 months of banking experience and still thinks he can own the business. Joe and Bernard, already in the eye of the storm, go along with the idea. Things get worse when some white customers, convinced by Florence, withdraw their money from the bank, fearing that the NAACP is behind the whole thing. A surprise visit from a federal examiner leaves Matt panicking, and as expected, he runs to Bernard and Joe for help. Eunice's brilliant idea is for Bernard to disguise himself as a janitor to spy on the meeting and save Matt from the mess. Bernard, in a classic stubborn man move, refuses, saying that's women's work. Of course, Eunice gives him a reality check, and he ends up donning the janitor's uniform. The irony? Even with the disguise, he can't hear a thing, and Matt, as usual, messes up. With the bad loans discovered, Joe and Bernard have to shell out $300,000 to cover the losses. Matt, with the confidence of a cat that just knocked over a vase, gets involved in a scam, buying up the bad debt from the other bank. When Joe and Bernard find out, they rush to confront Matt, but it's too late. The Treasury revokes the bank's license, and in the blink of an eye, the FBI shows up to arrest Joe and Bernard. Matt walks away unscathed and even blames the two. In court, Bernard is pressured to take immunity in exchange for confirming the fraud, but he opts for a nobler approach, calling out the injustices of a financial system that excludes black people from the American dream. What's interesting here is how the story touches on deep themes of systemic racism. It's that age-old question, how can you build a life if you can't even get a loan to start? This directly reflects a point I found fascinating, Bernard's courage in highlighting these problems, even knowing his freedom was at risk. As for me, I would have avoided getting involved in a bank buying operation without having minimum control, but I would have taken Eunice's advice from the start and gone undercover as the janitor to help more effectively. Bernard's courage in confronting the court about the exclusion of black people from the American dream was a true testament to his integrity. As I mentioned earlier, this movie was based on real events. Bernard Garrett and Joe Morris really challenged the racist system of the time, using a white man as the front for their business, and achieved impressive success before facing their downfall. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Take care, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video. See you next time.
And I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect.